Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleeden-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. And while you rest, I'm going to tell you a bedtime story. So lots of goodness imbued into this broadcast for you. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And so my specialty is helping you connect with your angels. Angels are divine messengers of God. They are celestial beings who are the embodiment of unconditional love, divine love, the kind of love that shines more brightly than the sun. And so I want to invite you to get comfortable, to get cozy in whatever way resonates for you. And we're going to talk for a little while, and I'll call the angels in. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to tell you a story, and we'll be together for about an hour. So you have plenty of time to rest and drift off and be wrapped in the embrace of your beautiful angelic team. So I'm fortunate. I have a wonderful job as an angelic practitioner. I facilitate one-on-one angel sessions. I also offer soul mentoring, which provides for ongoing consistent support as you move through a time of transition or growth. And then I offer a variety of classes, which are wonderful. Most of my classes are very intimate, so we have lots of time together when you partake in one of my classes. So if you're enjoying the energy of this podcast and would like to learn more about my offerings, I invite you to visit me at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. It'll be tagged in the show notes. You can also visit me at my Facebook page of the same name. And I have the daily inspiration email blast where I will send you an inspiring email every weekday. So lots of ways to connect. But for now, it's time to rest. So I invite you to take a deep breath in. I'm going to take one with you. And just let go. Let go whatever came before this moment. And just remember to breathe. I know we breathe all the time because otherwise we would not be here. It's part of the requirement for being in a human incarnation. But when the angels invite us to take a breath, it is that invitation to come to center. To just take a meaningful breath that connects us with our beingness. And so when I invite you to take a breath, the invitation is coming from the angels, and I breathe with you. So as I record this, it is the early morning. And I will say that last night I had one of those wonky nights sleep where there was not a lot of sleep involved. I was wide awake at 2 a.m. And I listen to sleep podcasts to help me drift off. So this podcast can be used as you're drifting off to sleep. It can be used in the afternoon when you are seeking a respite from the world and it can also be used in the wee hours of the morning. I much prefer listening to sleep podcasts when I am awake, when I want to be sleeping, because it's much better than me laying there in frustration that I'm not going to sleep. Because all I know is I'm not asleep yet. Still not asleep. When am I going to fall asleep? And so I find it so much nicer to put on a sleep podcast and follow the rhythm of someone else's voice. And I don't know if you can hear it, but there are some very noisy birds outside. There's quite a commotion happening. So we will invite that in to add to our ambient noise. If you ever look at the different, sleep sounds, there'll be running water, bird noises. So this will be bird noises right now. Someone's in a kerfuffle outside. And so I hope you are in a place to surrender into rest. The energy's been so interesting lately. It had felt really oppressive for much of August. As I record this, we're towards the end of August. And I felt this tremendous lightening come in the last few days. I was talking with a friend yesterday and, we did the requisite, how are you? And usually I answer, I'm good. It's that social, like, I'm good. I'm still here. I'm working on it. And I found myself saying, I'm really good. And I thought, who said that? Where did that come from? And I realized it was me. And it's not because I'm doing anything differently than I did before. I think it's indicative of this energetic weather we're in. So my hope is the brightening of energies will be sustained for quite some time, and that you will feel it too. If you don't already feel it, that you will feel it very soon. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the sense of hope. I'm grateful for new ideas floating in. I'm grateful for the ability to be here with you right now. This is really an answered prayer. If I look at my life 20 years ago, I was praying my way into this moment. I was hoping that I would find the courage and the insight as to how to break free from my life so that I could embark upon a path that felt much more authentic, and that I could find my way of serving others and bringing light into their lives, so that you are listening in this moment is a miracle and an answered prayer. Because here we are. I didn't know that my path would lead me here to this microphone in the blanket fort of love in this moment where I could share love with you. It's remarkable. So thank you for all of your moments that led you here as well. So I'm going to call the angels in, even though they are already here. But this way you will be assured that they are here as well. So beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here, and I am so deeply grateful for your presence, for your love, and for your support. I ask that you infuse this broadcast with waves of light and love that will bless and uplift each of our beloveds who listens to this broadcast. Angels, I ask that you help each one of us find our way on our authentic path, that you help us rise up into the brightness of our destinies, singing the song of our souls, helping to bring better days into this world. And angels, please clear away any old sense of stuckness, any old energies we no longer need to embody, clearing away anything that does not belong to us, and helping us come into the brightness of our spirit. Thank you, angels, for helping us remember who we are as divine beings in human form. Thank you for the sparks of inspiration. Thank you for the willingness to meet our sparks of inspiration with inspired action and co-create new adventures in this world. Thank you for bringing more ease to our paths. Thank you for the blessings of healing and of illumination. So, dear ones, just take a beautiful, nice, deep breath in and allow the love to come to you now. Just imagine, if you will, that the angels are filling your room with a soft pink light, not the kind of light that keeps you awake, but a vibrational light that helps your body relax, that helps you feel like it might be easier to drift off into sleep. I find this energy field to be so compatible with sleep, and I hope that it works for you as well. So just allow a wave of relaxation to start at the top of your head and just flow down your body, down your shoulders, down your torso, down your thighs, all the way down to the tips of your toes, sending love to every cell of your body, every thought in your mind, and every emotion in your heart. You, dear one, are a blessing here on earth. You are one of the ways that God's love flows into this world. The world is better because you are here. And there are beautiful adventures still to come for you. Allow yourself to connect with the love of your angels as they shine upon you now. And they will watch over you while you rest. And while you rest, I'm going to tell you a story. So tonight, I'm going to tell you a story from my own life. And it's a story about unexpected family. It's a story that is very, very dear to my heart. And I'm grateful for an opportunity to share it with you, because perhaps it will bring forward your own memories of unexpected family. You know, family comes in many forms. They can be those that we were born into. They can be chosen family, soul family. And this is one of my stories of unexpected family. So, growing up, we were very close to my mom's side of the family. She had two sisters. One lived, well, she used to live in Connecticut, and then she moved to California, while the other one lived about a mile away from us. And she and her husband, my uncle, had two sons who were a little bit older than us. And so we spent all the holidays with my aunt and uncle and our cousins. And as we all got older, spouses were added into the mix, and then children came, and my mom's side of the family were really the ones that we spent all the time with. Now, my father had a sister we were close with, but she didn't have any kids. So as a kid, that wasn't terribly interesting. I'm so sorry to say that, because I am now an aunt with no children as well. But it was like that was adult conversation, and but she was lovely as well. And the thing was, we grew up with an unusual last name. My maiden name is Bleeden. So when I say Bleadon-Maffei, Bleeden is my maiden name, and Maffei is my husband's name. So I hyphenated Bleedon-Maffei. And we thought we were the only Bleedens. Very unusual name. We never saw anybody else in a phone book with our name. As far as we knew, there were no other Bleedens to be found. And my father was not much one for reminiscing. He was very pragmatic and stoic and lived in the moment. And so I knew that they had cousins because he belonged to a cousins club, but they really weren't part of our life. So I'm now in my early 20s where we pick up this story. And I have gone to school to study television broadcast, and I've gotten my first job in television. I'm working for a TV station in Chicago. And I've always wanted to go to Los Angeles. Always. And as part of my job for the TV station, I was the broadcast materials coordinator, I think, something like that. And so my department was responsible for contacting all of the studios and getting all our broadcast materials in-house so that we could hear them. So we would call the different studios: Universal, Warner, Fox, Samuel Goldwyn, which might sound familiar because I wound up working there. And we would coordinate getting all of our videotapes and 16 millimeter films in, so then we would have the materials to air. This was way before streaming services. You had to have the actual videotape or film. I think one or two shows were downloaded over the satellite, but that was a big deal. So I knew people at all the different studios. So in early 1985, I planned a girls' trip, a vacation to LA with two of my girlfriends that I worked with. And it was going to be awesome. We were going to visit the studios and eat at Spago. A very typical LA kind of trip. And, you know, the other thing to remember, in 1985, there was no internet. There were no Google Maps. Google didn't exist yet. And when you would go visit a city, you would get one of those travel guides like Fodder's or Frommer's, Michelin, and you'd sort of read up to figure out where you were going to go and where you might stay. And you'd get maps from AAA so that you could find your way around the strange city. So there was planning involved. And so we'd planned this amazing trip. And I'm talking to my parents about it at some point. And my father drops this nugget. He says, if you're going to be in LA, you should look up Joe Bleeden. He's Johnny Carson's publicist. Okay, cue squealing tires. Like, wait. What? What did you just say? Joe Bleeden, he's Johnny Carson's publicist. Okay, wait. Okay, there's so much to unpack here. And I didn't use the word unpack because I don't think we used it in that way. But I was like, okay, first off, there are other Bleedens that we don't know about. And oh, by the way, they work for Johnny Carson, who was the late night god at that time. How did this not come up in conversation before? And my dad just shrugged it off. He's like, I don't know. So I'm thinking, okay, Dad, what else are you holding back here? Because this was a big deal. It was a huge deal. I didn't even know this man existed. I didn't know that he was in the entertainment industry. I like, how did I not know that this was happening in my family? So I think I must have gotten Joe's contact information from my aunt, my father's sister, because I wrote him a letter. And I introduced myself. I said, hi, I'm Jack's daughter, and we're coming to LA and would love to meet you. And I didn't really know Joe at that point, but Joe just always had a soft spot in his heart for family. He was always looking for Bleedens wherever he went. And he wrote me back a letter and said, love to. Let's make a plan. And so that got woven into our Los Angeles itinerary. So we wound up meeting at the Good Earth restaurant in Westwood. Good Earth was one of my favorite restaurants. It was sort of a health food restaurant, and they make that delicious cinnamon orange tea. If you ever see it in the store, the Good Earth tea, that came from that restaurant. So anytime you came into the restaurant, you smelled the tea first. So I remember having this amazing aroma coming at us as we entered this restaurant. And they had an upstairs and a downstairs, and we went downstairs. So we go down this sort of dark staircase. And as we emerge, there is this long table of people. I didn't know I could be related to this many people. And at the table was Joe. And Joe was really my dad's generation. So he was older than me, he was, I think, a little bit younger than my dad. And he brought 3 of his 5 kids. He has 5 kids, and 3 of them were there. The other 2 were older and weren't living in the area at that time. And he introduces me to his kids, who are all around my age. 2 sons and a daughter. And the daughter's name is Susie. And Susie's a year younger than me. And this is going to be important in a minute, so hang in there. This is all going to make sense, I promise. And you're supposed to be falling asleep anyways, so if you're completely confused by my family tree at this time, it's okay. So, also at our table were this older couple, senior citizens, that's what I mean by older, Pearlie and Ed. Now, Pearlie was my dad's first cousin. I didn't even know my dad had a first cousin. Pearlie was like 4'8". She was a very diminutive lady. And she was a powerhouse. Like, she was this bright spark of light. She would wear this bright lipstick, and her boyfriend's name was Ed. And they square danced, and they were always going somewhere. They were always busy. You had to book to get on their calendar. But I had never met her. I didn't even know she existed. And there were other people at the table too, but really the ones I want to focus on was meeting Joe and my cousins, Susie and her brothers, and Pearlie and Ed. So I sat across from Susie, and we just can't figure out how we didn't know about each other, right? How did we not know each other? how did our fathers fail us in this way that we didn't know that we had another cousin our age? And we really hit it off. So it was just this remarkable experience meeting all of these people I didn't know I was related to. And at least my experience of coming together with family like that is that there is a connection that somehow is born from the ancestors. It exists. So we all met up for that dinner. Now, that's not all there is to tell about the story. There's way more. So we complete our LA trip. I go back to Chicago. A few months later, I find out about the job in Los Angeles at the Samuel Goldwyn Company. I apply, I get hired, and now I move out to LA. I don't know anyone. I mean, now I know Joe and Susie and her brothers, but I don't really know them. You know, I'm new to town. And I meet up with Susie. And here's the part where it starts to become so beautiful. So over that first year or so, Susie and I would get together and our friends would meet. And our friend group began intertwining. And, you know, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, in my early 20s, my friend groups, we would travel in packs. You know, there was a group. We traveled en masse everywhere. And so our friend groups started intertwining. And Susie and I became best friends, sisters. I mean, we became each other's person. And one of our friends started calling us each Bleeden, because her last name is Bleeden too, but she spells it different. It's a whole Ellis Island thing for any of you who are Ashkenazi Jews or you are an immigrant from a country where the alphabet is not the English alphabet. You know, the spelling in English doesn't really matter. So we use all the vowels. Her family used one of the vowels. And one of our friends started calling us Bleedens. He's like, hey, Bleeden. So Susie and I started calling each other Bleeden. It's like, hey, Bleeden. Hey, Bleeden, how you doing? And up until that point, I never liked my last name. There's nothing poetic about it, Bleeden. But I started loving my last name as a result of our coming together because it was now part of my identity. I was a Bleeden. And we had a big family. And we loved each other. And we took care of each other. And so Susie and I really built this beautiful circle of friends and life together. At some point, several years after I moved there, somewhere around the same time, I had been living in a one-bedroom rent-controlled apartment in West Hollywood. I had broken up with someone about, I don't know, a year earlier, but hadn't really recovered. I was still in my bitter phase. And Susie had just broken up with someone and now was looking for an apartment. And back then, again, before the internet, the way you would find apartments is you would look in the newspaper. You might sign up for some kind of rental program. Our method was you drove up and down every single street in the neighborhood where you wanted to live, looking for rent signs, writing down the phone numbers, and then calling everybody. So Susie and I had this down to a science. We both had cell phones. So cell phones back then were really, really expensive. You paid per minute. And I think I only had 20 minutes on my cell phone a month. You try using a cell phone for only 20 minutes a month. It was like for emergencies. And she had more minutes than I did. So we typically would use her phone. And we would drive up and down every single street, writing down every single phone number, and then calling all of these places, looking for places to live. So we had done this several times already for different places we had lived. And at that time, we were really looking for a 1-bedroom for Susie. And we were driving up and down, and it seemed like all we saw were 2 bedrooms. And then we started in this neighborhood, and in LA, there are these gorgeous duplexes. So what a duplex is it's first off, most of them are ornate. They're gorgeous. They're huge. They're 2 stories. The bottom part of the house is one apartment, and the top part of the house is a second one. They typically have Spanish architecture, fireplaces, formal dining rooms, tile work. I mean, they're gorgeous. And we started seeing different duplexes for rent. And at some point during our drives up and down the streets, we started thinking, you know what? We should move in together and get a duplex. And then we realized if we moved in together and got a duplex, we could get dogs. Like, we could each get a dog, and we could have a duplex, and we could live together. And this was frickin' brilliant. So, complete change of plans. So I'm thinking, okay, I could leave my apartment because I don't have a lease anymore. And now we start looking at duplexes. And we find this one duplex. And for those of you who are familiar with LA, it was in the Pico Robertson area, which is beautiful. And we saw this one duplex that was on the 2nd floor and an incredibly inexpensive rent. Now, I'll make you weep. I think it was like $800 a month or something like that. It was very inexpensive. And it was gorgeous. Huge windows, a fireplace, formal dining room, eat-in kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and 2 baths. It was about 2,000 square feet. And we just knew that this was our place. And we found out that they would take dogs, even though we didn't have our dogs yet. And we put in an application and signed the lease. And we had our duplex. And it was such a joy to live together. I don't know, it was like one of these things like, oh my God, I could have had a V8. Like, it was, oh my God, we can live together. And we had the most beautiful life in our apartment together. And this is when I got my dog Tessa. So I was the first one to get the dog. I was looking for different dogs. When I knew I wanted to adopt. I didn't want a puppy because puppies eat everything. And so I was looking for different dogs. It's a really weird thing to look for your dog because I think it's like people, it's like your dog when you meet your dog, right? So I'd be meeting all of these dogs and they weren't my dog. And one day I realized, this is interesting. This is like magical manifesting before I knew about magical manifesting. So I realized one day after going to shelters and adoption events and not finding my dog that maybe I should look for a Samoyed. So if you don't know about the breed Samoyeds, they are white sled dogs. And the thing is that my family had Samoyeds. So I was really imprinted with the breed. And I thought, I wonder if I should see if I could adopt a Samoyed somewhere. And I kid you not, like the next day or the day after in the newspaper is an ad. Adoption. 4-year-old female Samoyed. And I was like, oh my God, I think she's my dog. And we went to meet her. So the woman who was giving her up for adoption bred Samoyeds, and Tessa wasn't quite show quality, so she couldn't be bred, and she failed obedience class, which I came to understand because she was profoundly stubborn. And when I met Tessa, I was like, oh my God, she's my dog. And Tessa was not her name. I gave her that name. Her name had been Fiona, and I had somehow crossed paths with someone named Fiona that I did not like, so I was like, that can't be my dog's name, and I named her Tessa because I had met another dog named Tessa, and I thought that was such a pretty name. So Tessa came to live with us. She was part of our family. And so for a while it was Susie, Tessa, and I. And then Susie got her dog Mike, and Mike was like a cockapoo. He was a terrier poodle mix. And he was a puppy. And he and Tessa were brother and sister. So we had several years of living together with our dogs. And it was such a great healing time that we had both been disappointed by relationships. And we were like, we're just going to move into a duplex and get dogs. That is our solution. And we did. And because our apartment was so big, we entertained a lot. We would have dinner parties. Like dinner parties. We could sit 6 or 8 people in our dining room. And so we would have parties. We would have people over. We would watch our soaps. It was a wonderful time of my life. And this is what I mean about unexpected family. I didn't even know I had cousins. And I did not know that there was a cousin my own age who would become my best friend and my other sister. And that we would live together with our dogs and, have our friend group. And I also just have to say Joe, who's Susie's dad, was just wonderful. He was like just such a sweet man. And he had a fascinating journey. He had been Jimmy Durante's publicist. So back in the day. So he kind of knew everybody. And he loved connecting with other Bleedens. He was the keeper of our family tree. He was always trying to figure out how we were all connected. So for any of you who are interested, here's how we are connected. Again, you're supposed to be sleeping, so if you can't make this out in your mind, it's okay. So my great-grandfather, his name was Yehuda, also known as Julius, but in Yiddish would have been Yehuda. Yehuda was a brother to Joe's great-grandfather. So on the family tree, I'm the same generation as Joe, but chronologically, Joe was really the same generation as my dad, if that makes sense. So we're related, but pretty far down the line. I don't even know how many cousins twice removed we are, but what mattered is we're mishpocha. Mishpocha is Yiddish for family. We're family. We're Bleedens. And I got such a great gift in that moment at the Good Earth when I met them, because I would have another family, a second family. And so Susie and I lived together for several years, and her dad lived in the neighborhood for a while as well. And then he would move to Vegas sometimes, and he worked for the big hotels there. And I will say at one point he was working at I can't remember if it was Bally's at the time. Bally's became MGM Grand. So we used to go to Vegas back in the day of classic Vegas, not New Vegas, which is basically Disneyland on steroids for adults. But this was old school Vegas we used to go to. And we got to see Jerry Lewis and Sammy Davis Jr. at Bally's. We sat in one of those big banquettes, with the red leatherette seats, and got to see truly a classic Vegas show. And we would travel everywhere. We went everywhere. We would take road trips all the time. We thought nothing of taking a road trip, leaving work on Fridays and driving to Vegas or Palm Springs or wherever we wanted to go. One of the things Susie and I still laugh about to this day is how we were always eating out and putting stuff on credit cards. Like, I think I was paying my credit card off for 10 years after that. One of our favorite places to go with our friends was the Cheesecake Factory, which, if you live in the US, you probably know about the Cheesecake Factory. They might also be international, I don't know. But back in the late 80s, Cheesecake Factory was not a national chain yet. There was the one in Marina del Rey. And the one in Marina del Rey, especially if you wanted to eat there on a weekend, you had to wait like an hour or two to eat there. And we didn't care. We would go with 8 people, and we might wait 2 hours to get our table. And we didn't care. It was the Cheesecake Factory, and we were hanging out together. What did we care? At that age, I didn't need sleep. And we wouldn't even think about going out before 7 o'clock. We often didn't meet up until 8 o'clock. I'm in bed by 8 o'clock now, but back then, we didn't need sleep. So we would get a big crew of us together and we would go to the Cheesecake Factory, which was expensive even then for the day. And we would just put our food on the credit card and feast together. So we were into the Cheesecake Factory before the rest of the country caught on to the wonderment, the wonderland that is the Cheesecake Factory. So we lived together for a lot of years, and then we split up the household for different reasons. One of them, I wound up moving to New York for a job, which is a whole other story. And I was not happy when I made the move. That was a really hard year. And then when I finally moved back, we did the apartment search again to try and find me a place to move back into. And I did not get a duplex the next time. I got this just really unimpressive 2-bedroom apartment in the Pico Doheny area. And the only thing that was good about it is that they would let me have my dog. But I wound up living there for a long time until I moved to Northern California. And then we did it once again when Susie needed to find another apartment, and we found her a charming one. And for a long time, her dad lived around the block from me, which was awesome. And so it's my story of unexpected family. As the pandemic hit and we all started, sequestering in our homes, the introvert in me was delighted to just be at home. I love being home now, but Susie and I would talk that we're so lucky this did not happen when we were in our 20s and our 30s, because back then we were always on the go. We were going to concerts, we went to clubs, we went everywhere. I lived a really big life back then. I always wanted to be around people. I wanted to be in crowded places. One year we went to Vegas for New Year's Eve, and we would be in the casinos and just having a wonderful time. And so I love that I got to live such a big life in my younger years. I can sort of bask in the glory of it. And And now I'm happy to be home. And, I'll also say, and so the lovely thing is that Susie and I, each of us married a wonderful man. Her husband is wonderful. I love him, and she has a beautiful son. And I love my husband. It's like we both got to live our way into beautiful hearted marriages, which had been part of the dream we had been seeding for ourselves in our younger years. When we were younger, our biggest wish was, I want to get married and have kids. And I will say that once I got Tessa, this is going to sound terrible. Once I got my dog, I didn't really want to have kids anymore. Isn't that weird? It was like all I could do to come home from work and put a lean cuisine in the microwave for me and give her a bowl of kibble and walk her. I thought, I don't think I can take care of another human being. They need a lot of care. And so my own maternal urges dwindled quite a bit once I had a dog. But Susie went on and had a family. She's a beautiful son. And so we're still connected, and I'm so grateful. And it made me fall in love with my last name all over again, which is part of the reason I kept it when I got married. I didn't want to just be Bleadon-Maffei. I was Laurel Blieden. I was Bleeden. Come on. It's my identity. It's who I am. And so that's why I became Laurel Bleeden-Maffei. And I'll also say another chapter of our family opened up in 2019. So in 2019, that was the year my mom passed away. That was the big sigh. And I think as part of my healing, I dove back into genealogy. So I should back up a little bit. I had done quite a bit of genealogical research years ago when Joe and my dad were still alive. And we had taken down as much as we could figure out about our family line, with a lot of immigrants, and certainly Ashkenazi Jews. Our lineage gets really fuzzy when we go back a couple of generations. And there's a few reasons for this. One is, this might come as a surprise, but Jewish people were not terribly fond of where they lived when they were in Eastern Europe. They were treated as second-class citizens. And so they typically did not feel a sense of loyalty to the countries in which they lived. My family comes from Lithuania, Latvia, Hungary, and, all of those countries were sort of part of the Russian Empire. And their lives were very, very difficult. And typically in the Jewish religion, especially if we go back a couple hundred years, Jews didn't use surnames. You were your name, son of your father's name. So, David ben Yehuda, not this convention of using surnames wasn't really part of the Jewish culture until the government said you need to have a last name. So we became the Bleedens. And back then, when they immigrated, they didn't really give a whole lot of thought about how the last name would be spelled. When we came over, we were Bleaden. The story goes that my grandfather and his brothers had a jewelry shop, and the sign painter painted their name Bleadon, and they're like, okay, and they just adopted it. So that's how we got our spelling. And if you think back then, it was hard to stay in touch with each other. People would move, and people would disappear. So there's not a lot of information that we can find back when our families were still living in Eastern Europe. But so here's why I bring all of this up. So now comes this fancy schmancy thing called the internet and Ancestry.com and DNA tests and all of those things. So in 2019, I dove back into genealogy and connected with this wonderful woman named Tara, who is a Bleeden from a different Bleeden line. And what has been so incredible is she did a ton of research on our family, and she has woven together dozens and dozens and dozens of Bleedens and Bliedens and Bleedons, and everybody sort of might pronounce it a little bit differently, in South Africa and Australia and the UK, all over the place. And we're not quite sure how we're all related, but we know that we are. Like somewhere, there are like 3 or 4 times great-grandfathers that we all share. And it's become this lovely group of people that we've connected with. And Tara's amazing. She has done newsletters for our family. She does Zoom meetings, where people get together and share. And we've tried to figure out how we all know each other. And I just think Joe must be smiling from heaven because he must be so delighted by this. He loved gathering family together for purposes of genealogical research. And so it's so interesting to me how we didn't really grow up with my father's family. He wasn't really close with them. He was close with one of his sisters. And we grew up thinking we didn't have any relatives from my father's side, only to discover this amazing, beautiful side of our family that really, heart and soul, has become my family. And so that's why this episode is about unexpected family. I didn't know that these people existed, and then we met and we really became a family. And I think our ancestors must be very happy about that. Life was hard for them. We have my great-grandfather's journal. It's written in Yiddish and Hebrew, and my sister had it translated. And to read about his life, they had a very, very difficult time of it. And thank goodness they wound up emigrating to the U.S., because if they hadn't, we kind of wouldn't be here, probably. And then, 85 years later, 90 years later, after they emigrated, that I would come back together, right, with Joe and Susie and Pearlie and our other relatives, that somehow across the timeline of our lives, we would find our way back together as mishpucha, as family. And so it warms my heart, and I really just wanted to devote this episode to my Bleedon mishpucha and all of the years of love and devotion and joy and support that we have exchanged. And I'm just so deeply grateful. I have met so many wonderful people from this line of our family. And I'm so deeply grateful for the ancestors who somehow wove the tapestry of our lives together once again, right where once we were parted, we found our way together again. Isn't that amazing? So, my beautiful friends, I hope that you have found some unexpected family as well. Whether you're genetically related or not, people come into our lives And we get to choose our family. We get to make our family. And there's something about family that lights a flame in the heart of love. At least for me. I hope it will be true for you as well. And I do acknowledge that sometimes families can be difficult or toxic, but hopefully for you, my hope is you have found or created some wonderful family as well. So this goes out to my big, beautiful family. Those of you I'm related to, those of you who I am related to at the soul level, that I think it's really wonderful to have that sense of belonging to a family that will embrace you. And I know that that is not easy to come by sometimes in life. But my hope is that you have that. And if you don't have that, my hope is that the angels bring it to you. And for now, I invite you to be in our Illuminating Souls family. We have gorgeous light workers around the world. So you're part of the Illuminating Souls Mishpacha. Welcome. We'll send you out a membership card soon. So in the meanwhile, dear ones, I love you very much. I'm deeply grateful for you. Thank you for being a part of my soul family. And I wish you sweet dreams. We'll talk again soon. Good night.